King Charles has just made a decision, and the whole country is trying to work out what it really means for the woman beside him. In June 2026, he and Queen Camilla appeared side by side at Royal Ascot, smiling, the picture of a settled reign. Yet beneath that easy image, his latest move has set royal watchers across Britain on edge.
It's terrible that after 50 years, it is behind closed doors.
All circling the same uneasy thought that something about the Queen's place in the monarchy is quietly shifting. The palace has said just enough to get the entire country talking, and nowhere near enough to explain what is truly happening. A choice announced. Here is the strange part. To understand why a single choice has turned into a national guessing game about a queen, you have to start with what Charles actually announced, because on the surface it had nothing to do with Camilla at all. It was about a house. Not just any house. Buckingham Palace, the most recognizable royal residence on earth. The backdrop to coronations and jubilees, the site of the balcony where the family gathers on the grandest days, and the whole world stops to watch. For years, the assumption inside royal circles was simple. Once the palace finished its long refurbishment, the king and queen would move in just as sovereigns had done before them. That assumption is now gone. Buckingham Palace has confirmed that Charles and Camilla will not make the palace their home once the work is complete. The reasoning offered was practical and public-minded. The couple want the palace to stay the ceremonial center of royal life, the primary workplace of the royal household, and a national heritage asset with wider public access. A palace spokesperson framed it as a building that will remain a working home while opening its doors further, so that a landmark funded by the public delivers the greatest possible national benefit. Charles, the spokesperson noted, keeps a deep affection for the palace and a real respect for its place in the life of the country. And this is not some decision made in a hurry. The refurbishment is an enormous undertaking. Work began back in April 2017 and is not due to finish until April 2027. A full decade of scaffolding, restoration, and reworked infrastructure behind those famous gates. So, the choice not to live there is the long-considered answer to a question that had hung over the reign since the day it began. Think for a second about what that building represents, though, because this is where the trouble starts. Buckingham Palace is not merely a home. It is the address the world ties to the crown itself, the working heart of the monarchy, the place where the whole machine actually turns. To choose not to live there is, in the language of symbols that royalty speaks, a genuinely big move, even when the practical reasons behind it are completely sound. So, the moment the announcement landed, something curious happened. The conversation drifted somewhere the statement never went. It drifted straight to Camilla. A quiet pattern. Here is what turned a decision about a building into a headline about the Queen. It did not arrive on its own. It landed on top of a year that already had people watching Camilla more closely than usual, hunting for a pattern nobody at the palace had confirmed, but plenty of observers were sure they could see. For most of this reign, Camilla has been the constant. When Charles was diagnosed with cancer and stepped back from public-facing duties for treatment, it was Camilla who appeared in his place, over and over, holding the visible front of the monarchy steady while the king recovered out of sight. That stretch did more than fill a diary. It fixed her in people's minds as the reliable center of the working family, the one who turned up when the sovereign could not, which is part of why the newer signals have drawn such attention. Camilla is 78 years old. She has given decades to public service and the sheer physical grind of royal life. The travel, the standing, the endless engagements is not something anyone carries forever. So, when a figure at the very heart of the monarchy starts to look a little more selective about where and how often she appears, people notice. And with no official word to explain it, they start to guess. None of this, on its own, proves a single thing. A quieter run of engagements is not a demotion. A decision about a residence is not a decision about a role. But line them up. The building, the age, the changing rhythm of a long reign, and they form a shape that royal commentators find almost impossible to ignore. And once people start seeing a shape, it is very hard to make them unsee it. That is the honest center of all this. Not some dramatic announcement, but a handful of quiet signals the palace has left unexplained, and a public rushing in to fill the silence. And that is exactly why it is worth staying with this one to the end, because the whole story lives in the gap between what has been confirmed and what is merely being whispered. If you want the real picture rather than the noise, take a second to subscribe. This channel follows the royal story as it actually unfolds, weighing the evidence instead of chasing the rumor, and there is a great deal still to come this year. Now back to the moment the guessing truly caught fire. A prediction spreads. The clearest example of how fast guesswork can outrun fact came from a source with no connection to the palace whatsoever. It came from an astrologer, Debbie Frank, a celebrity astrologer who was once a close friend of Diana, Princess of Wales, offered a prediction that traveled far and traveled fast. Speaking to a royal magazine, she suggested Camilla's role was being rewritten in 2026 and that the Queen would step back from duties younger members of the family could just as easily perform. She cast it as a year of transformation in the dynamics between king, country, and queen, with Camilla's responsibilities becoming more clearly defined from the spring onward. Now, be completely clear about what that is. It is astrology. It is not a palace statement, not a briefing from a royal source, not a document, not a policy. It is a reading of the stars, offered as entertainment, and it deserves exactly the weight that implies, which is to say almost none. The same astrologer even stressed that Camilla would stay a powerful force, not a diminished one. And yet, the prediction spread precisely because it put words to something people were already half thinking. It gave a shape to a hunch. When a public is primed to expect a shift, even a horoscope can feel like proof. That is not a sign of some plan inside the palace. It is a sign of how badly people want these quiet signals to add up to something. This is the part that gets lost the moment a rumor hardens into a headline. A prediction with no official standing became, for a lot of people, evidence of a decision nobody in authority had ever announced. The gap between what was actually said and what was widely believed had grown into a canyon. And to see how wide that canyon really is, you only have to look at what Camilla has been doing. A long road. To understand why any question about Camilla's future carries such a charge, it helps to remember how she reached the throne in the first place. Few paths in modern royal history have been more contested. For years, she was cast as the outsider, the figure blamed in the public mind for the unhappiness of a beloved princess, the person the country was least ready to accept in a place of honor. Her rehabilitation was slow, deliberate, and hard-won, built one quiet engagement at a time across the better part of 2 decades. The turning point came from the highest authority there is. Just months before her death in 2022, Queen Elizabeth II made her wishes plain, expressing that Camilla should be known as Queen Consort once Charles became king. It was a blessing that changed everything, a signal from the late sovereign herself that Camilla belonged at the center of the family. When Charles acceded that September, Camilla took up the role, and the following spring, on the 6th of May, 2023, she was crowned at Westminster Abbey, in the first coronation the country had seen in 70 years. That history matters because it explains the sensitivity now. A woman who fought that long and that publicly to reach the throne is not someone the public treats with a shrug. Every shift in her standing gets measured against the distance she traveled to get there. And so, a quiet decision about a residence, which for anyone else might pass without a word, becomes for Camilla a moment loaded with meaning it may not actually carry. Which raises the obvious question, the one the rumors conveniently skip past. What does her recent record actually show? The real record. Set the guesswork aside for a moment and look at what Camilla has actually been doing, because her recent record does not read like the story of a woman being edged toward the exit. If anything, it reads like the opposite. In May 2025, during a visit to Canada, Camilla was sworn in as a member of the King's Privy Council for Canada. That July, the King appointed her Vice Admiral of the United Kingdom, making her the first woman ever to hold the title. In March 2026, she became the first female member of the royal family to join the Garrett Club, a long-standing institution that had only recently opened its membership to women at all. In April 2026, she stood beside Charles on a 4-day state visit to the United States, one of the most demanding assignments in the whole royal calendar. And in June 2026, the couple appeared together at Royal Ascot, smiling for the cameras in a very public show of continuity. That is not the trajectory of a figure fading from view. Those are honors, firsts, and frontline duties, several of them handed to her by the king himself. Camilla remains patron or president of more than 100 charities and organizations, with long-running campaigns on osteoporosis, on awareness of rape and sexual abuse, on literacy, and on animal welfare, work she has built patiently over decades. And go back to the hardest stretch of this reign, and the point gets sharper. When Charles received his cancer diagnosis and pulled back from public-facing engagements for treatment, the monarchy needed a visible anchor, and Camilla became it. She carried the schedule, kept the family present at the events that mattered, and absorbed a workload that would have tested someone half her age. A monarchy under real strain leaned on her, and she held. That is not the record of a consort being quietly pushed to the margins. It is the record of the person the institution keeps turning to when it needs steadiness most. So both things are sitting there at once, and that is the whole puzzle. On one side, a resident's decision, an age, a slower rhythm that all invite talk of stepping back. On the other, a run of new titles, historic firsts, and marquee appearances that show a queen very much in her role. Both are true, and that contradiction is exactly why the speculation refuses to die down. But there is one more layer to it, and it is the one to be most careful with. The whispers around her. There is a final thread here, and it deserves more caution than anything discussed so far, because it lives almost entirely in the world of anonymous sources. Alongside the questions about Camilla's public duties, a separate strand of reporting has been circulating about tension inside the family. Some of it centers on the ongoing questions around Prince Harry and whether and how he might be brought closer again. Reports attributed to unnamed sources have described the Queen and the Prince of Wales as sharing a wary view of any such move, painting it as a gamble the king seems determined to take. Every word of that belongs in a category clearly apart from the confirmed record. It comes from insiders who are never named, published by outlets that trade in palace intrigue, and none of it has been confirmed by anyone speaking officially. It might hold a grain of truth, it might be entirely invented. From the outside, there is no way to tell, and treating it as fact would be a serious mistake. What matters is how these threads feed each other. A resident's decision that is real, a slower schedule that is visible, an astrologer's prediction that is not evidence, and a layer of unverified gossip about family strain. All of it braids together in the public imagination into one story that feels far bigger and far more settled than any single piece can actually support. The story turns into a mood, and a mood is a very hard thing to fact-check. So, why does a story like this take such a firm hold in the first place? Reading the signs. Part of the answer is history. Camilla's journey to the throne was one of the most scrutinized in modern royal life. She spent years as the most criticized figure in the family, slowly winning an acceptance that once looked impossible. An arc that dramatic leaves people permanently alert for its next turn. When someone has climbed that far against that much resistance, watchers instinctively brace for the fall, whether or not one is actually on the way. Another part is the nature of the monarchy itself. It speaks through symbols, through who stands where, through which residence is chosen, and which duty is handed on. When an institution talks in, he signals. Its audience learns to read signals, and sometimes to read far too much into them. A decision about a building becomes a statement about a person. A quieter season becomes a verdict. The palace's own habit of saying little and explaining less creates the very vacuum that speculation floods into. And part of it, honestly, is just that people care. Camilla is one of the most familiar faces in public life, and the question of what her future holds is one that millions feel genuinely invested in. That investment is not a flaw, it is why the story travels. But it is also why the story slips so easily past the facts. Then there is the bigger moment the monarchy is living through. This is a generational hinge, a stretch where the weight of royal life is visibly shifting toward William and Catherine, the future king and queen. In a period of handover like this one, every reassigned duty and every changed arrangement invites the same question, whether it belongs to the natural passing of responsibility between generations or to something more pointed. Camilla's role sits right on that fault line. When the whole institution is quietly rebalancing toward the next reign, it becomes almost impossible to look at any single change involving the current queen without wondering which force is really behind it. That is not something the palace engineered. It is simply what a monarchy in mid-handover looks like from the outside. So, where does all of it leave the actual answer? What it means. Strip away the horoscopes and the anonymous sources, and here is what can be said with real confidence. King Charles has decided that he and Camilla will not live in Buckingham Palace once its refurbishment is finished, choosing instead to keep it as a working and increasingly public heart of the monarchy. That decision is real, it is on the record, and it is the solid thing sitting at the center of all this noise. Everything past that is interpretation. Whether it signals a broader, deliberate reshaping of Camilla's role, or simply reflects a practical preference about where to live, is not something the palace has confirmed. The idea that her position as queen is being formally reduced or rewritten has no official backing behind it at all. She is still queen, she is still active, she is still being handed new honors and frontline duties even as the speculation swirls around her. What has genuinely changed is the conversation. One practical decision, dropping into a year already thick with quiet signals, has opened a question the monarchy has chosen not to answer out loud. And in that unanswered space, a public that has watched Camilla's entire improbable journey has started writing the next chapter for her, whether or not the palace ever meant one to be written. That is the real story, not a dramatic reversal, but the strange, very modern spectacle of a decision about a house becoming a referendum on a reign. The facts are quieter than the headlines. They almost always are, and that distance between the two is where every royal rumor is born. For now, Charles keeps his crown, Camilla keeps her role, and the monarchy keeps doing what it does best, saying just enough to leave the whole country guessing. Whether the coming months bring a genuine shift, or simply more of the same careful silence, this speculation is not going away. It rarely does. If this breakdown helped you tell the confirmed from the merely whispered, subscribe so the next chapter reaches you the moment it becomes clear, and drop a comment with your honest read. Do you think the signals point to a real change ahead for Camilla? Or is this just the royal rumor machine turning a decision about a house into a headline? The most thoughtful answer might just shape the next video.